Thank you for being patient with us. I wish to introduce also Mrs. Patricia Sutherland, the member of the party's Education Commission and the party's caretaker in Southeast Clarendon, where she takes a particular interest and concern in the activities of the schools. In due course, you will be handed a brief on, it's entitled Addressing the PEP Debacle. It was prepared a couple of weeks ago, but it's still relevant, and it will allow us to skip over the narrative of our concerns as a party regarding the results of the primary exit profile. I wish to always begin our interchange with the press by indicating the philosophy of the People's National Party in respect of education. First principle is that education is a human right and it must be available equitably and qualitatively for everyone in Jamaica, regardless of economic status. Secondly, that we see educational outcomes as being the critical, the most important element, ingredient for issues of national security, social peace and harmony in the society, and indeed as the only way for economic advancement. We will never reach our 2030 goals or 5 in 4 or anything else unless we radically transform our education system. And the third element of the PNP's position is that we remain steadfastly willing to partner with the government of the day in the development of education policy and remain critical supporters in every aspect of its execution. So those are very important contextual positions for you to always bear in mind, and hopefully to help us to advance to the public. This morning I want to begin with some of the issues that have to do with back to school. The Ministry of Education has said that we are headed for a seamless start, and we hope so. We strongly support any effort that is made to ensure that schools reopen on time and that basic facilities are in place. However, there are some very significant contradictions in the position which the government has been taking. First of all, both the Prime Minister and one of the 3 ministers in education have been reiterating that auxiliary fees have been abolished. Every single child at every element and stage of education has got a voucher to pay. How can you be asked to pay what you say has been abolished? That is a contradiction which is confusing parents and is a cruel deceit in the cause of effective education. The schools cannot do without the money, the contributions that come from parental engagement. Warning principles, and on occasions considering them extortionate, does no justice to their need or to the quality of education which everyone desires for all of our children. If the contributions by parents which schools need are to be abolished, then the government must now, not in the future, provide the additional money so that schools can maintain the highest levels of performance, offer the highest levels of education without calling upon external groups such as parents to provide. This is simply it. A Minister of Education or in Education this morning is reported as saying that government is planning to rebalance the assistance given to, I gather, high schools. Well, that is a position that we have taken in forums like this and otherwise for a long time, and we would be glad to see that happen, but not in the future. It needs to be done now. You cannot give Haile Selassie and Eltham High and Merlin Otti the same amount of money as Campion gets and expect that you are going to have similar outcomes. Why not now? This country is flush with cash. The savings, the frugality of the stabilization years has been given to real estate dealers and to the holders of capital to build apartments and townhouses while schools remain on shift, while nutrition is inadequate for our children. 30% of them still go to come to school without breakfast. When Minister Samuda says that 70,000 of children will be provided breakfast in September, we welcome that, but we wish to tell him that the number needing it is 5 or 6 times that multiple. We must decide, the People's National Party insists that we must use our resources for the benefit of those most in need, not those most in greed. And we insist that resources be found not sometime in the future, but rather right now, by the opening of school, for the proper enablement of every element of our education, from pre-primary, certainly through primary and high schools, for the dispensation of quality education. In the meantime, confusing parents that they need not contribute is not helpful. Our principle remains: no child should ever be excluded or should be prejudiced in any way because of the inability, note my term, inability of their parents to contribute. At the same time, given the present financial arrangements between the government and the public schools, every contribution by a parent is a worthwhile investment in their child's education. The Bible speaks about putting obstacles in the way, particularly of little children. The PNP has been informed that some schools are requiring now, at the high school level, that students have a TRN number in order to begin school. This is nonsense. Yes? There may be reasons over a period of time for this, which we don't know, but there must be no obstacles that are put in the place of effective education. I'm sure Mrs. Sutherland will say more about this, particularly in respect of the textbooks. It's all well and good for the book industry to say to us this morning that the prices are relatively even to last year. But the problem is the number of books that are being required. We have seen a book list for PEP students that comes close in cost to $60,000. This is unconscionable. The state must provide for, under the new standard curriculum, the state must provide the basic texts, and the supplementaries can be provided for students or given access to them in a different way. I'll invite Mrs. Sutherland shortly to tell you our ideas on this. We want to make the central point, though. When slavery was abolished, you see, money was given to the slave owners rather than to the slaves. In 2019, we are using our surplus to benefit those who already have capital rather than to assist those who are most in need of relief for the pearl of great price, a good education. We would like to encourage parents that they do not need to buy all the books on a given book list at one time, that they should inquire from schools, the schools to which their children are going, what are the texts that they need to use first, and try to buy those. We applaud the efforts of well-intentioned people, members of parliament, councillors, churches, philanthropists, of generous people all, who are assisting students to equip themselves to go back to school. And we too trust that with the modifications that we are suggesting, those that are set out in our release that we are going to be handing to you, will be assisting in that regard. There's one last issue that before I yield for a moment, and it is the issue of teachers. Jamaica Teachers Association is in their annual conference today. One of the issues that will face them, they've acknowledged it last week, I heard the president saying, is the vast attrition of the most qualified teachers to greener pastures. Why don't we get sensible? If we are going to say that we are in a market economy where we can't accept Fitzjackson's resolution regarding bank fees, for example, because the market must regulate itself, why can't we keep the same principle in respect of the supply and demand for teachers? We have lost over 100 of our best science and mathematics teachers in the last 6 to 8 months. It's a continuing attrition. If we want to improve the dismal results in our mathematics arena, we welcome Mrs. Elaine Foster-Allen, the chairman of the Educational Commission of the PNP. She will give us some of the statistics there. They're already reasonably well known to you. If we want to make that difference, then we're going to have to let the market incentivize or demand an incentive for those teachers. We are still paying teachers which are in great demand the same as we pay others. We are rewarding the good, the bad, and the mediocre in the same way. The People's National Party says that we need an immediate emphasis on the incentivization by way of scholarship and additional salary to those teaching posts that are in most demand. When we were in office, we provided 100 scholarships for math and science teachers in 2015. I am so happy that the minister can now report that some of those who will be graduating after 4 years this year ought to be available for the schools. But I am chagrined that the report from many of the tertiary institutions is that target of 100 has been collapsed in subsequent years, when in fact we need multiples of the 100. We must stop ambushing ourselves in respect of education. The People's National Party insists that it must point out these critical elements that need correction, and we remain committed to a partnership with the government. I'm very pleased for the colleaguery that has been extended to me by the interim minister, Mr. Samuda, and we look forward to continuing that pilgrimage for the benefit of all our students. May I invite Mrs. Duncan Sutherland and Mrs. Foster-Allen to address you now on issues to do with particular issues to do with back-to-school preparations and on the issue of the analysis of the results of the CAP, City and Guilds, CAPE, and CSEC results.
Good morning. Yes, thanks very much for having me this morning. I'm going to expand a little bit on the situation on back to school. You know, all of us in the different constituencies and in our different charities have been hosting many back to school fairs because people need help at this point. And also because I'm yet to meet that mother or father who is not concerned about how will their child go back to school prepared for the school year. You know, and I just want to put it out there to the press. I want you to understand it. A mother, parents with 2 children, one in high school and one in primary school, right now. And I'm not going to talk about the child who is doing PEP. I'm talking about the primary school child in grade 1 to 3. For high school, your tuition or your parent support, as it is now called, is an average of $10,000 per child. For your books for high school, average of $20,000. Then you have to find uniforms and shoes if you want your child to wear a uniform and a shoe that fit them for this year. Because all of us who have had children know that every year that child foot going to grow and every year that child going to get bigger. Right? So you have to go find another 10,000 for that. That's at least 40,000 for the high school student. For the primary school child, an average of 4,000 for parent support, with an average of $10,000 for the books for grade 1 to 3. And if your child is at PEP, you're talking about the 60,000, as Reverend Waits just pointed out. And then you also have to find that uniform and shoes of another 10,000 at least. Not to mention the medical, the etc. Right? So each parent has to find anywhere between 70 and 100,000 in August if they have 2 children. Each parent in Jamaica right now. So what we have in our education system is a real crisis from the perspective of a parent. Because when we say that we have increased employment, we know that 70% of the persons employed are earning less than $7,000 per week. And they must find in 1 month $70,000 to send their children back to school. So as Reverend Waite said, we have a responsibility when we have money available to us as a country to work out how we're going to help them, to help their children to get an education that will allow them to become owners of capital. So rather than helping the owners of capital and hope that some drop off for the owners of capital onto those who do not have capital, we need to help those who don't have capital to be able to become owners of capital. And in that context, I just want to point out that it is unfortunate that it is this morning that Minister Alanda Terrelong chose to put out, or yesterday, a press release that says no more than $5,000 is allowed to be charged for registration packages for new students. I wonder if he knows that registration packages are put out in early July for every student. Because how could he be making this statement in the 2 weeks before school start? Did he not consult with principals to know that they were going to put out packages? Is it his first time? Does he not have any experience with what is occurring in the education system in Jamaica? I wonder. I also wonder, because then he says to the parents that you don't have to pay it. So what is his plan? Again, every year since 2016, May of 2016, Royal Reid came out and said, no auxiliary fees, parents, you don't have to pay it. It's called parent support, but you don't have to pay it. And then I will be putting the money in the education system. The money did not come. 2017, the same thing is said. 2018, the same thing is said. 2019, the same thing is said. But this time, not only by Orlando as a junior minister, but also by the Prime Minister, without having actually put the money in the education system to deal with this situation. So it makes me wonder if they are really about managing the education system so our parents and our children can benefit, or they are about the PR around feeling that you do have free education. All right? We all want free education in Jamaica. But to have free education, and free education is not education that is not paid for. Free education meaning that it is free to the recipient of education. And therefore, as government, as taxpayers, we have to put the money behind the education so the recipient does not have to pay. Otherwise, they will not get free education. They'll get free daycare at the school because it takes money to educate our children. All right? And so when we think of a PEP book list of 60,000 and a high school book list of 20,000 and a regular primary school book list of 10,000, and we know that we have money in the Universal Service Fund that we had intended for Tablets in Schools program. We know that when we implemented it at first, we did not implement it with this intention. But I am putting it to the government that the way that we can solve this textbook problem is to make all the textbooks, all the workbooks available online, put the tablets in all of the schools and only use them as the workbooks. When the children have workbooks to do, they use the tablets to do their workbook programs. And they do not need to go and spend $60,000 on a workbook. books can be made available online to our children. It will make it much cheaper to for our parents to be able to give them what they need. So this is one very specific solution that we want to put to the government, because what our parents are facing now, when you earn $7,000 a week, and to wake up in August to know that I need to find a way, well, you know it from the beginning of the year, but I need to put down my partner, that is $80,000 I need to find. If my children, and I do not know exactly what that figure is, I know that 80,000 is going to jump to 130,000 if my child is in grade 4, 5, or 6, because them have to get the pet book list. All right? It is a real problem for Jamaica, and we can solve that problem, but the government has not chosen to solve it.
I'm inviting Mrs. Foster Allen to address the press conference now. May I just add one element that supports what Mrs. Duncan Sutherland has said. Members of the press, please remember that the education budget this year is able to buy less than what last year's budget was, and that the capital budget has been decreased considerably by over 30% and is on a trajectory by the government's own figures to decline virtually to nothing in the next 3 years. What kind of commitment to education and to upliftment through education is that? Ask yourselves.
Good morning.
Morning.
Ronnie has asked me to make some comments on the examination results, the CSEC examination results in particular. I think we as an opposition would want to congratulate all our students who have done very well and those who are emerging and will do better as the years go by. When we look at the initial results, or at least an analysis of the initial results, we see some improvements in areas such as chemistry, and that's a good thing, English A, information technology, and music, for example. Textiles, clothing and fashion, and in visual arts. We also, however, note that there's been a decline in certain subject areas, and we want to ask that the government, the Ministry of Education, pay particular attention to these areas. English B, for example, we see a decline of minus 12.8 percentage points over last year. Human and social biology, minus 12.1% over last year. And there are some other issues, or at least one major issue that I have seen raised in the press or through social media, and that is what is happening in math. Now, we see minus 3.2 percentage points over last year, and when you look back over the past 5 or 6 years, you see a fluctuation, upwards, downwards, upwards, downwards. So clearly there are some things happening in the teaching of math that must be addressed. When we were in administration, we did many things, some of which I think are paying off now. For example, the math coaches in our schools. We, however, note that there has been a migration of math and science teachers, and Ronnie spoke about those issues earlier on. But we must insist that this government cannot put pre-trained teachers in to teach math and science. You need at least pre-trained graduates. I saw something last week that spoke about pre-trained teachers. That needs to be clarified. Are we talking about pre-trained sixth formers coming out with CAPE math? and science subjects, or are we talking about university graduates who have the content and would need some help with the pedagogy? There's a huge difference between the two. So those are some of the issues there. I want to take up something that Patricia said about the primary school textbooks. We're using PEP textbooks. We should really be saying the National Standard Curriculum textbooks. One of the things that we are recommending, given that in some instances the textbook list that have been sent out will cost a parent anywhere from $30,000 to $60,000 per child. Now, we should perhaps be recommending, Ronnie, that the Ministry of Education look at a textbook rental system for the primary schools, where there is an investment in purchasing textbooks for those schools, and the children can rent or have those books on a rental system over the years of the primary school curriculum. We know that the workbooks will still come at a huge cost because those are individual books that are written in. So there will still be a cost to parents. But I think we think consideration should be given to the primary school textbook rental scheme. We would also want to urge the government and the Ministry of Education to bump up the training of teachers for the teaching of the National Standard Curriculum. I was at a meeting the other day where teachers were complaining that they are still not getting the sort of training that is needed. They're still getting the large 300-400 teachers placed together in one room, and it is just not working. We think smaller groups, smaller seminars with people who know what they are doing, put together, and those teachers being held accountable for dissemination and for practicing what they have been taught or what they have learned in those sessions. And it really does mean that principals will have to improve or increase their monitoring of activities of what happens in the classroom. Not just for putting teachers in their place, may I add, but for supporting the professional development of teachers and, of course, the learning that will take place amongst our children. Thank you.
May I add something?
Sure.
I just wanted to point out one more area that I know that our permanent secretary in the Ministry of Education says we are off for a smooth start for the beginning of this year. Yes, it will be smooth, but I just want to make the point that every year, every school submits a list of repairs that need to be done to that school for the summer program, for the summer. And that occurs somewhere between May and June of the year to the Ministry of Education. I, this year, went to all of the schools, in particular in Southeast Clarendon, and got that list. And that list was quite varied, but it included fixing bathrooms, it included fixing desks and chairs, it included fixing up classrooms, it included fixing ceilings that are dropping down. It was a good list that showed that the principals were thinking about what was required in their schools. And a lot of our schools are in deplorable condition. I am told that this year, on August 2nd, a memo went out to the chairman of schools saying that each primary school would get $100,000 to do repairs for the school year for the primary school. $100,000. That's a total of just under $70 million, or just over $70 million for all of these primary schools in Jamaica. I want to point out that last year in Northwest St. Anne, where Rural Reed had intended to run, $20 million was spent to fix the schools over the summer that period. The same period in Southeast Clarendon, $1 million was spent in one school in Southeast Clarendon. Now each school is getting $100,000 to prepare the children, to prepare the school to receive children. This is not enough, and it is too late on the 2nd of August to tell a principal when they are going to get the support to fix their schools. This is something that should have been done in July so that they could have made the arrangements. And I believe if we had $15 billion to give back in taxes, we could have taken $700 million and given that to our primary schools to fix up our primary schools to be ready for our children.
Just to add that, as well as having pre-trained graduates come into the classroom, we have a number of well-qualified retired people who could come back to do the math and some of the sciences. So consideration should be given there. Ronnie, you want to just make the...
Would you please? Concern.
Okay, we also have a concern about the CAP
Career Advancement Program.
right, in regard to the attendance pattern that we have seen over the past few years. It is actually in decline. So while the numbers may look really huge in terms of registered students, we are seeing a decline. I have some figures there, Ronnie. May I just pass them to you?
Cool, thank you.
Thank you. So, for example, in 2015, just looking at the math, we had total registered over 6,000 students. In 2019, we have over 10,000 students, but the attendance has been falling off over time. In 2016, 73%, 2017, 71%, but in 2018, 68%, 2019, 66%. And the same, perhaps even worse, for English, where it moved from 70% in 2015 up to 73% in 2016, and then since 2017, 68, 65, 64%. So we're seeing a decline in terms of the attendance, while the numbers have been have increased. The number of students registered has increased, but in terms of the attendance, we're seeing a steady decline.
And what we're also seeing is, of course, with the numbers goes the expenditure. And therefore, we are asking for a full audit of the Career Advancement Program to ensure that we're getting value for money and that we are addressing the fact that in many instances, the CAP program is stymied because it turns out to be a literacy program, because so many of those who enroll, whether or not they attend, is because they simply cannot read and write, even at that stage. That's exactly it, Mr. Moore. If the government is going to enable the schools sufficiently to offer quality education, to go back to my example, if Haile Selassie is going to get enough money that it can offer the same program as Campion, then that's fine. To the extent that it cannot, and in any event, parents contributing to their children's education is a worthwhile investment, we say. And promises to alter the amounts that the per capita for each school according to their particular need must take place now, not in the future. For every day that it is delayed, it indicates a continuation of the misguided priorities. Rather than seeking to elevate the base, we are further endowing the already endowed. Taxpayers' money must be invested in education. It would, as my colleagues have said, it would take a relatively small amount of money to make that difference. And we insist, and it's a basic philosophical position we take. We do not believe in top-down, trickle-down economics and social programs. We believe that it is from the base that you properly allocate the resources largely of the base in order for their own advancement. Sure.
Morning, William Mitchell, Nationwide News. You were saying that it's not enough to put pre-trained teachers in schools. The government needs to do more. Last week we spoke to some teachers who work in different countries overseas, America, England, Japan, and for them it wasn't just the salary, it was the benefits, extended vacation, things like travel allowances. One teacher in America said she got a $2,000 signing bonus just for signing on to the school. Jamaica isn't in the place to do that for teachers, but if not the pre-trained teachers, what else can we do?
Increase the scholarships that are available for training teachers and bond them because they have been trained and got a great benefit at the expense of the taxpayer. That's one. Two, follow the suggestion put forward by Mrs. Foster Allen that we remove the rigidity of this retirement age at 60, William, yes, and encourage and incentivize our teachers and all those who are capable in scarce subjects like science and mathematics, yes, in order to come and give service in the school. And thirdly, expand the use of technology, which is Mrs. Sutherland's point, in education. Every student has access to a smartphone. She mentioned the tablets. Why not make virtual education a real opportunity for our most underserved teachers? We were well on the way to doing that in 2014, 2015. I do not know what has happened to that program. In my view, the public broadcasting television station should be 24/7 in education. That some of the propaganda that public access time is used in our radio and free-to-air television, yes, ought to be made available to purveying the scarce lessons of the best teachers for the most underserved students in order to uplift them in the shortest possible time and in an economical way. My view is that we have to see this in a broad time frame over many administrations. We have left the reform of teacher education significantly behind our national needs. And it's not just a question, Khadija, of those in the training colleges. One of the real regrets that I have for the time I spent as minister, and I'm sure that those who have followed will share it, is that the reform of the teaching profession, as provided for in the new law, yes, the Jamaica Teaching Council law, is still pending. It hasn't even come to Parliament, because that provides for continuing professional education. The 27,000 teachers in the public school system, many of them were trained significant time ago. The world has changed. Yes? The new standard curriculum they were never exposed to it. The measures, the half-hearted but well-intentioned measures that Mrs. Foster-Allen spoke of, yes, still leave them behind and consequentially leave our children behind. So the reform of the teachers' colleges to meet those requirements and also to meet our globally competitive needs in 2019 remain an important challenge still to be confronted and solved in the educational system.
And if I could just add. So there's also another big problem we have in that our teachers, the remuneration for our teachers is very low, and therefore it looks very attractive to go overseas. Apart from the remuneration, also their working conditions. I spoke to the conditions of the school. It's hard to work in our conditions in schools in Jamaica. But the problem we have with increasing remuneration is that we have inside of our fiscal framework a ratio of our percentage of salaries to our GDP, how much it is that we can pay out as salaries. As a country, I personally believe we need to look at this inside of our public sector reform, because if we continue to hold strain on salaries of teachers and the police, right, and the nurses, three critical areas, our major employees, but three critical areas, there's going to be an unintended consequence. So we're going to fix one element, but there's going to be an unintended consequence. I don't know what the solution is, but I am saying to EPOC, I'm saying to our lawmakers, we need to look at this, because it is a real thing. The brain drain in the area of teaching and nursing especially is real.
Well, I was just thinking about another variable, the rurality factor.
The what?
Rurality factor.
What is that?
Well, I was just thinking about the question you asked, Khadija. Clearly, there are several variables in regard to the adverts for vacancies, to fill vacancies. The migration of teachers clearly is one. The fact that many new teachers do not like the idea of going back to rural communities. And then, as Patricia said, there are issues around the conditions that some teachers have to work in. And there are also issues about pay. So we can't just pick out a variable and say that is the cause. There are several things that are at work at this time. Okay.
May I issue my own thanks? You know, the fact that members of the media are willing to take a considered and concerted interest in education is gratifying. So often we take the education system for granted, and what we are doing here and what you are permitting us to address you on is issues of profound importance to the future of individuals, every individual, and of the nation. We are indebted to you. Thank you.